Hey there, Heather, ho there, it's Jeff Cutter Diamond. Welcome to yet another Cutter Top 10 NFL video that's sponsored by the New England Patriots. Today we're going to be looking at the top 10 NFL Cinderellas of all time. You know, the teams that looked bad on paper, but basically did their talking on the football field. So we're going to be looking at the Cinderellas and the glass slippers, if you will. Number 10 is the 1988 Cincinnati Bengals. Now, to note, when I say 1988 Cincy Bengals or whatever the teams are, it's just the season it was because, you know, the playoffs in 1989. The Bengals won 4 games, going 4-11, and they were terrible. But somehow, some way, Boomer Esiason could throw passes. Sam Weish was a good coach. They decided to do with the fast-paced no-huddle offense, basically predating Buffalo. And the Bengals looked pretty good. They won the AFC title game. I think that was at home against Buffalo or something. And then, you know how Joe Montana and crew were. So the Bengals took on the Niners in the final, just like 1982, but 7 years later, this was different. This was a Cincy team that had Icky Woods, you know, the Icky Shuffle, and then Stanley Wilson, a good fullback who could help. Unfortunately, though, hours before the game, it was revealed that Stanley Wilson was arrested and charged with cocaine possession, which you cannot do. And Stanley Wilson was thrown off the team, and the Bengals were allegedly shocked that Stanley Wilson was not playing. And if it wasn't for that, maybe the Bengals win. So, yeah. Bengals actually did well. Stanford Jennings had a 96-yard touchdown off of a kickoff return for a touchdown. And then the Bengals were close. They were up 16-13. It looked like they were going to win. And then Joe Montana's massive drive. He even told his teammates that, hey, isn't that John Candy? Because, you know, NBC was doing some kind of NFL talent show, trying to get some pre-Super Bowl ratings up. But the fact of the matter is that Montana was Joe Cool giving the passes to Jerry Rice, and then over the middle to John Taylor with 39 seconds left, and the Niners won the Super Bowl. But the Bengals were close. They could have pulled it out, which would have given them a higher mark on this list. Number 9 is the 2017 Philadelphia Eagles. I know you probably say they're low because of spite, because you know who they beat in the final. But I can assure you it's not really spite. Philly had a strong roster, and they looked good. However, Carson Wentz, the man from North Dakota State, who are now in the FBS, aka Division I football now, was good. Carson Wentz injured himself. Philly took a lot of gambles on Wentz. So he was injured, and then Nick Foles, the guy from the University of Arizona, which no one wanted, took over. And somehow the way the Eagles went on to embrace the underdog label and get to the final against my New England Patriots and beat them. Thanks to the Philly special, you know, the fourth down play, which they should have went for a field goal, but they didn't. They went for a fourth down, and then they had the guy throw the touchdown pass to Nick Foles. I think it was Goddard. And the Eagles won the Super Bowl, to my chagrin, of course. I'm a Patriots fan and all that. But the Eagles kind of deserved it. So did they when they beat the Chiefs with Saquon Barkley winning the Big Boy title. Number 8 is the 1986 Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jags were pretty good. Like, they were decent. They were an expansion team. It was weird having a third NFL team in Miami, in Florida, because they had Miami, they had Tampa, now they have Jacksonville. Jacksonville, the Gator Bowl, most notable that stadium was hosting the big Florida-Georgia game every year. But Jacksonville said, let's play football in the NFL, and they got it. They were an expansion novelty. They were actually a field goal short of missing. No, sorry. This was this year. This was the year that Jacksonville actually would have missed the playoffs if it wasn't for a Morton Anderson missed field goal, I think, right? Yeah. In just their second season, they went from expansion novelty to AFC title game participant. It's akin to the Diamondbacks, because when they went in baseball in '98, they were expansion team, and then the second year they won the division, but those pesky Mets ruined them. Anyway, the Jaguars went into Buffalo, beat the Bills 30-27. Jim Kelly would retire, I think, the next season. And then they went from the wild card game to the divisional round against the Denver Broncos, who got a bye as the #1 seed, and they were looking good. They had Terrell Davis decently. They had John Elway. They had Shannon Sharp. They had some great wide receivers. They had a good defense. So Denver felt good. Worst of all, the Rocky Mountain Press actually wrote down the Jacksonville Jaguars, Jagwads. Basically a massive insult on Jacksonville's name. However, Mark Brunell, with a few key plays, helped Jacksonville beat the Broncos 30-27, and it was a massive, stunning thing. But the loss actually helped the Denver Broncos because they decided to change their color scheme to kind of a bluish with orange, a more dark blue primary color with orange sides, and they changed the helmet to the flaming Bronco, and it worked out quite well. Anyway, Jacksonville went into the AFC title game, lost to the Patriots. My Patriots. I was not really a Patriots fan back then. I was 12 years old. But anyway, it was huge. They almost did it. They almost got to the final. And what's even more weird is that their expansion cousins, the Carolina Panthers, almost did it in the NFC. They beat the Cowboys. They won the NFC West. They beat the Cowboys and then lost to the Packies. That's the Packers. Why did I say it like that? Jeffrey. Number 7, the 2005-06 Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh, a great team in the 2000s and all that. Unfortunately, they had some bad luck. 2002 and 2005, they lost the AFC title game to my Pats in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh would end up being the 6th seed, the lowest playoff team you could have at the time. Remember, there were only 6 teams per conference that moved on. The Steelers would have to play their rivals from the AFC North, the Cincinnati Bengals, in the first round. They beat the Bengals. They looked pretty good, giving Cincy another playoff loss. What's worse for the Bengals was that Carson Palmer was injured by a hit, seemingly low hit by Kimo von Oelhoffen. And then the Steelers went on to face the #1 seed Indianapolis Colts in Indy. Everyone thought that Peyton Manning was going to win the Super Bowl this time. Well, of course, I'm a Patriots fan. I'm saying, fuck that. No. The Colts and Steelers were playing each other. The Steelers were about to get a touchdown that would have iced it. Jerome Bettis, who rarely fumbled the ball, and then Nick Harper grabbed the ball. And Ben Roethlisberger took it seemed like a feeble swipe at Harper's ankle, but it worked. Harper went down at the 40-yard line. That would have been a scoop and score. And then with time remaining, Vanderjagt went for a 40-plus yard field goal, but he shanked it wide right, which basically ruined Vanderjagt's career with the Colts. And the Colts went out to pick up Adam Vinatieri from the Patriots, giving us Gostkowski in the process. But that was just huge. Vanderchoke, yeah. Steelers went into Denver and shocked the Broncos, and then went on to the Super Bowl and beat the Seahawks. And of course, Seahawks crying the Super Bowl 40 was rigged. Number 6, the Raiders of 1980. The Raiders made history. They were the first wild card team to win the Super Bowl. They basically walked so that the 2005 Steelers could run. Jim Plunkett was back at it. He had a terrible career. He was the #1 pick out of Stanford for the New England Patriots, and then Plunkett couldn't hack it with the Pats, so he went to San Francisco. And he didn't do anything. So he went to the Raiders, not expecting much. They actually had Dan Pastorini, who they made a trade with the Oilers to get rid of Ken Stabler. And Pastorini went down with injury, so Plunkett had to come into the game, and somehow the Raiders looked pretty good. They knocked off a series of high-profile opponents, got to the wild card. Now, in 1980, the wild card round was different. The NFL had 5 teams per playoffs. They would have the 3 division winners, and the winner of the 4-5 game, which was the wild card game, only 1 wild card game, in contrast to 3 in the NFL nowadays. The Oakland Raiders, can't remember who they beat in the wild card game, but they did. They won the wild card game. They went into Cleveland to face the Browns in the cold of Cleveland Stadium. Cleveland was known as the Cardiac Kids because of all their wins late in the game. Oakland was up 14-12. Cleveland could have kicked the field goal to make it 15-14, but Don Cockcroft had botched an extra point and a field goal, so San Rutigliano didn't think that Cleveland could do it. So he called for a pass play instead of a field goal, and Mike Davis, who rarely catches balls defensively, made the catch Ozzie Newsome was supposed to get the ball, and the Raiders shocked the Browns. Then the Raiders went on to go to San Diego, their rivals, who won their division round game and won the division. And then in the heart of San Diego, the Raiders beat the Chargers, beat Dan Fouts and the high power offense, went to the Super Bowl, took out the Philadelphia Eagles. So they did it. It was possible. And they became the first wildcard team around to do it. Number 5 is the 1969 Kansas City Chiefs. This was the year before the AFL-NFL merger had happened. That means that, the AFL teams were going to be merged into the NFL, so they could play their own league. So the American Football League ended with the Kansas City Chiefs winning the AFL title, taking on those pesky Minnesota Vikings, the Purple People Eaters. And this was the first of 4 appearances for the Vikings in the Super Bowl. Chiefs knew that they were underdogs, and they were carrying the AFL flag. Kind of like the New York Jets, which we will get to later on this list. The Chiefs knew what they're doing against Minnesota. And Hank Stram, the coach, who was mic'd up for NFL film, said, let's matriculate the ball down the field. And they were running around like a Chinese fire drill. Can't say that nowadays. But anyway, the Chiefies shocked the Vikings 23-7 with their brand of ball. Otis Taylor was a pretty good player alongside Len Dawson. It was validation for the AFL, a turning point in pro football history, and practically why the Chiefs looked good. Unfortunately, though, they would not have massive success till 2020. Number 4 is the 1999 St. Louis Rams. Let's face it, the Rams sucked. They were 4-12. They've signed Trent Green to be their starting quarterback. And then this unknown from Northern Iowa by the name of Kurt Warner would be the backup. Unfortunately, preseason just ruined him, and Trent Green injured himself. So Kurt Warner had to come in. Kurt Warner was a guy from Northern Iowa, as I said, not really a major football school. He went to NFL Europe and the Arena Football League. Did well in those. Would have been the Green Bay backup to Brett Favre, but definitely wasn't. And then what's even worse was that Kurt Warner actually was a worker at Hy-Vee grocery stores and was a grocery store stalker, a nighttime grocery store stalker. So basically, Kurt Warner worked in the grocery store. The funny thing was, Warner helped out, and he was helped by Dick Vermeil, who was the coach of the Rams at the time, saying, we will rally around Kurt Warner and we will play great football. And he did. After the Rams made a massive move and picked up Marshall Faulk in a trade with the Colts, who then decided to use Edgerrin James in the draft, which actually was a pretty good move. Alongside wide receivers like Ricky Proehl, Az Hakeem, Torrey Holt, and Isaac Bruce, the Rams shocked everyone, winning the NFC in a sense. So Warner and co did their job. The greatest show on turf. They went on to face the Titans in the Super Bowl after that tight game against the Bucs, in which Ricky Proehl, of all people, with the winning touchdown. So the Rams would face the Titans. They were looking good. The Titans did tie it up. Sorry, and then the Rams were up 23-16. The Titans were 1 yard short. They just missed out on tying the game. But the Rams and Kurt Warner did it. Dick Vermeil retired on top. Mike Martz did a good job with the Rams, getting them to the 2002 Super Bowl, which they lost. And yes, that's a perfect segue to number 3, the 2001 New England Patriots. You knew the Patriots were going to get on this list, but no, they're definitely not number 1 for good reason. So anyway, the 2001 Pats were in trouble. They were 0-2. They had just basically lost a week due to 9/11. Drew Bledsoe got injured by Mo Lewis towards the sideline. And then the 6th round pick, who had 6 guys draft ahead of him, like Giovanni Carmazzi and T. Martin, was the second-year quarterback Tom Brady. So the guy from Michigan, after all, he did help Michigan beat Alabama in the Orange Bowl in his final college game, even though Bama lost the game thanks to a missed extra point. Purdue had the reins, and somehow in some way they went 11-5, won the AFC East, and won a bye into the AFC divisional round. They took on the Oakland Raiders in what is known as the Tech World game, in which Tom Brady allegedly threw a incomplete pass. Even though he fumbled, the Raiders got the ball. And this was before my Patriots fandom. I was actually a Rams fan back in the day, back in 2001. But anyway, the Patriots survived that. I mean, that tuck was terrible and all that. The rules were a little awkward. But the thing is, it could all have gone for shit if they had not won the game. Because remember, they were down by 3, and it was snowing like there was no other. Adam Vinatieri had to make 2 key field goals through the snow and put them through. Vinatieri could have easily missed either one, and the Raiders could have won that game. So yeah, because of the snow. They went into Pittsburgh, beat the Steelers. Brady actually got hurt. Bledsoe had to finish the game, and then they had to have the massive talk. Who's the main guy? And then they all decided it was Brady. Although Bledsoe did show some support. They went to Super Bowl 36 in New Orleans, of course, after 9/11. Bono and U2 with one of the greatest and most emotional halftime shows ever. The Patriots beat the Rams in Super Bowl 36. John Madden and Pat Summerall were going to finally, Summerall was going to retire from the position. John Madden was still kind of going. But anyway, so Madden told Summerall the Patriots should take a knee and go to overtime. But Summerall said, "Now just wait a minute." And then, that drive, Adam Vinatieri kicks it through the uprights. Lonnie Paxton doing the snow angel, even though there was no snow there. And it was a dynasty. Lots of teams had the dynasties from key plays. I mean, the Steelers had their dynasty in the 70s start with the Immaculate Reception. The Niners had the catch from the 1980s. The 90s guys, the Cowboys had not really a play, but a great team. And then you got the Patriots starting out from this seemingly innocent tuck rule game and then launching a dynasty, winning 6 titles in the process. So yeah, it was good. And Bledsoe went on to Buffalo. I mean, can you blame the guy? Anyway, number 2 is the 1968 New York Jets. This is the AFL stuff that basically was a bigger underdog in a sense than the Chiefs. The Jets were okay. They were a good team. Joe Namath spurned the NFL for the AFL. I think the Cardinals would have had him. But anyway, yeah, Joe Namath went to the AFL, helped the Jets do well, and made the AFL legitimized and all that. He had swagger. The Jets would take on the Raiders in the AFC title game at Shea Stadium when Shea Stadium had football, and the Jets beat the Raiders. What's even more crazy was that the Jets and Raiders earlier in the 1968 season played a famous game. The Heidi game. That the Raiders beat the Jets, but NBC fans didn't see it because, they ran in the 3-hour time limit. They needed to have Heidi on the network. And the Raiders won the game. And then they made the rule that the game will finish in the markets. So basically, California and New York would have gotten to see the end of that Raiders-Jets game, and the others would have seen Heidi. Nevertheless, the New York Jets went on to beat the Raiders, would take on the Baltimore Colts. Powerhouse 14-1. Despite the fact that Johnny Unitas, their star quarterback, went down to injury, it was going to be a time and a place for everything. And the logic was there that the Colts were going to win. Well, Earl Morrow was doing great. Unfortunately, though, the Colts made some mistakes. The Jets ran a touchdown by Matt Snell, 3 field goals by Jim Turner. They won 16-7. And the haunting image Colts fans would have is Jimmy Orr being wide open in the end zone, and no one threw the ball to him. Well, anyway, the Jets beat the Colts. It made sure that the AFL was good and made sure the NFL knew how good the AFL was, and basically may have started better merger stories. Of course, a lot of people said Super Bowl III could have been rigged because, with this whole AFL NFL thing, that, they wanted the AFL to beat the NFL somehow in some way and make sure the merger happened. And finally, number 1 is the New York Giants of 2007. They are the ultimate NFL Cinderella. They actually were 0-2. They had to go to the wild card and play 3 straight road games. They first went to Tampa for the wild card game. Everyone picked the Giants to lose to the Bucs. I actually thought, honestly, the Giants would beat the Bucs in Tampa because Tampa may have had the defense, but the offense tells a story. And poof, the Giants beat the Bucs in Tampa. Okay, that's part 1. Part 2 was them going to the number 1 seed Dallas Cowboys, but Tony Romo having the drama with Jessica Simpson and, of course, being a quarterback instead of a commentator as he is now. So the Giants went into Dallas, beat the Cowboys, and basically Terrell Owens had to defend his teammate Tony Romo, but basically Teal was just making a little too much drama, and it was all about him. The Giants would go on to Green Bay in a very cold and frigid atmosphere at Lambeau Field. I mean, you can't beat the Packers in the Lambeau Field, the frigid temperatures and all that. You just can't. The Giants somehow did it, even though Lawrence Tynes missed a couple of key field goals. They went to overtime. Brett Favre threw a interception in his last pass as a Green Bay Packer. And then Lawrence Tynes redeemed himself with the field goal. And they were going to the Super Bowl against Tom Brady and the 18-0 Pats, well, 16 regular season wins and 2 playoff wins. They were chasing perfection. The Giants used the pass rush. They allegedly used Dr. C, as in Paul Simmerman from Sports Illustrated's things on how to stop the Patriots and all that. I blame them to this day. And then, of course, Eli Manning's drive, which saw him escape a couple of sacks and then throw a ball up and high in the air. And David Tyree, with the presence of mind to get the football, stick it on his helmet to make sure Ronnie Harrison didn't knock it down, and then to make the catch. And then Plaxico Burress made the touchdown. It was 17-14, Giants won, pissing me off to the no end. I can never watch any Super Bowl 42 highlights because that just reminds me of how my Patriots were terrible and all that. So that just sucked. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond at Duke.